Welcome back to Forward Progress, part of the Hammer Betting Network. I'm your host, Jason Cooper, alongside Jake Ellenbogen, the host of Downtown Rams, Off the Edge, and the NFC West Roundtable, as well as being one of the best Rams YouTuber out there. You can follow Jake on X, on Instagram, on Twitter, on TikTok, at JK Bogan. You can check out his channel right here on YouTube. Just search Jake Ellenbogen. You can find his channel. Go subscribe if you're interested in the Rams. Today, we'll be covering everything you need to know about the Los Angeles Rams in 2024. Before we get started, quickly, I want you to comment down below how many wins you think the Rams will get in 2024. Let's jump right into it, Jake. Before we start looking forward, we must look back. Give me one word or phrase to describe the 2023 Rams season.
I would say unpredictable, because for me, I was not surprised how good they were, but I felt like the way things went down, you go into the season with Cam Akers expected to be the starter. The way he finished last season, I mean, was really impressive. And then he comes into that season, and it seemed like throughout camp, we were hearing Kamren Williams was going to get more opportunities, but we didn't hear he'd be the number one guy. And that kind of just evolved over time. In addition to that, unpredictable Puka Nacua. Just seeing Cooper Kupp go down in August and, a fifth round guy who, keep in mind, they had 4 fifth-round picks. They drafted Puka Nacua with their third of the 4 fifth-round picks, and he ends up being one of the best receivers in football, just seemingly instantaneously. I mean, the targets were crazy. The maturation just early on was thrown into the fire and, really just made the most of it. And then you had guys like Byron Young and Kobe Turner, who probably should have won Defensive Rookie of the Year. And, then you get, players like Akhilo Witherspoon and Demarcus Robinson, who end up being key contributors. And I think just all in all, it was unpredictable in a sense that it's the way it went down. Like I said, I had the Rams actually going to the playoffs before the season started. I had them losing to the Lions in the divisional round. They lost in the wild card round. But coming into the year, I was very high on the Rams. And, they were actually the hottest team at the end of the season. They lost by 1 point on the road in a hostile environment to the Lions. And that game could have gone either way. But the reality is they were one of the hottest teams, when you combine the whole year. But down the stretch, there wasn't really anybody hotter than the Rams. So just a credit to Sean McVay, who at one point or another people thought would give it up. I think just that 2022 season was very humbling. I don't think that they were a bad team. 5-12 was not what they were. Unfortunately, they dealt with a lot of injuries. They had 16 different offensive line combinations, and they had plenty of injuries at quarterback, wide receiver. Kupp and Stafford went down. They tried Baker Mayfield towards the end of the year. So to see what they were able to do in 2023, with pretty much everybody doubting them, there were a lot of people that said this team was going to be picking Caleb Williams. Okay, so let's not forget, that was initially the whole rhetoric, is that they are going to be in the mix for Caleb Williams and the tank for Caleb saga and everything. But this team, unpredictable, and they were able to really showcase just how good they really were last year. And it bleeds into this year in a very good way. They did lose Aaron Donald to retirement, but this is still a great team, and I think they're the best team in the NFC.
Fair. And unpredictable is a great word, because a lot of people didn't really expect them that. And the betting markets reflected that as well. They were around 6.5 wins, juiced towards the under last year. Like, there was a lot of disrespect for this team, but a lot of question marks surrounding the team too. But I think a lot of people kind of forgot who Sean McVay is and who Sean McVay was, especially after that 2022 season. You mentioned something, and that's the first thing I want to touch on, is the retiring of Aaron Donald. They obviously lost him as one of their biggest pieces on their defense for the last couple of years. It's a big hole to fill. There was also some more defensive changes. Raheem Morris gets hired as the head coach, and Chris Shula comes in as the new defensive coordinator. I assume Sean McVay is probably going to still call plays on defense. But I'm just curious, just to start here with the defensive changes, you kind of have a lot of changes going on. I'm curious how that defensive front for the Rams is going to be working as a unit. Who's going to be playing? Are we going to see a lot more verse in there? How do you expect this young unit to come together with the loss of Aaron Donald?
Well, I think the weird thing is we kind of all look at Chris Shula like, you went from legendary Wade Phillips to then you went with Brandon Staley, who was kind of a shot in the dark. Not a lot of people really knew much about him. And Sean McVay was very confident. He ends up leading arguably the greatest defense in Rams history statistically, number one defense in the league. And then you have Raheem Morris, who ends up winning a Super Bowl with them and is very consistent. So, you have three really good defensive coordinators. And a lot of people are like, who is this Chris Shula guy? Well, keep in mind, he's been with this team since 2017. He was brought over by McVay. He has pretty much dabbled in, those meetings, and he has worked hands-on with Wade, with Brandon Staley, with Raheem Morris. So to be honest with you, we don't really know exactly what his defense is going to look like, which is exciting. We also don't know what his defense is going to look like because Aaron Donald is gone. So there are going to be different creative ways to get pressure on the quarterback. They didn't do a great job of that last year, despite the fact they had Donald and Kobe Turner. Byron Young had a lot of pressures, but kind of fell off towards the end of the year. And Michael Hoyt, who I really like and I think is underrated, was kind of just played out of position, in my opinion. Kind of left on an island to, cover guys, and it just wasn't really fair to him. So this year is going to be a little different, I do suspect. They told us that this offseason. So what they did is when they lost Aaron Donald, which, by the way, they really tried to bring back Aaron Donald, wouldn't rule out a potential return at the end of the season, for a Super Bowl run. I just don't think Donald's going to do it, but I wouldn't rule it out. I think when you look at, the emergence of Kobe Turner last year and how, he was arguably the defensive rookie of the year, you look at him and he's taking on the leadership role that Donald leaves behind. So now he's the leader in the trenches. You have him, you have Bobby Brown III, who's very good, very underrated, doesn't get enough credit. He's going to have a bigger role. Then you go out and you get Braden Fisk in the second round. You trade up 12 spots. You give up a second rounder next year to secure him and, pair him, like with you mentioned, Jared Verse. They have a plan here. Now, there are some other guys that need to be mentioned as well. They brought back Laryl Murchison, who they really like as a rotational piece. Corey Durden is intriguing as a nose tackle, and you can't forget about Desjuan Johnson, last year's Mr. Irrelevant. So they have a lot of guys in the interior. I mentioned Michael Hoyt. I think he could play in the interior, but I think they're going to find different ways, creative ways to either, get pressure on the quarterback or disguise some coverages, make it tough on a young quarterback to make those reads and ultimately, deliver the ball at a timely pace. And I think the reason that I say that is because you talk about going out and getting a guy like Kamren Curl, who they got at midnight, not long after free agency started. And it was a little surprising. I'm a big fan of Kamren Curl. I've loved him from afar. I didn't think he was at all possible. I still can't believe his deal is the deal that he got. I thought he was going to get about $14 million a year. And he did not get that. So this is somebody who is excellent in run support. He's not a ball hawk, although he's shown, more, I would say, improvement in coverage. But I think what he does paired with what you already had in Quentin Lake is really, you have two guys that can essentially do everything. They can play the star role, they can play the nickel, they can come up and run support, they can be a hard hitting guy, but they could also, make plays with their range. They're underrated in coverage, and these guys can blitz as well. So I think we are going to see different, looks. They went out and got Kamren Kitchens, who's more of a ball hawking safety. I think he adds more versatility and diversity in that safety room. Then you have Russ Yeast, who's kind of turned into the star guy. We've heard all camp. It's been him and Darion Kendrick, the disgruntled cornerback last year, who I actually think is pretty good. He's just not really a fan favorite, but he's not a bad player. They've been trying to get the most out of him, but Russ Yeast seems to me like he has taken over that star role, at least for the time being. So we could see a lot of him. Very, very good athlete coming out of Kansas State. You saw just, last year and, over the years, at Kansas State with the Rams, somebody that can play on special teams, but also has the versatility to, cover. He can play corner. He can play safety. So they have a lot of versatility in the back end of their secondary. They have one linebacker who's top 10 in the league, in my opinion, Ernest Jones. And then you pair the pass rushers. We talked about Byron Young kind of falling off last year, at the end of last year, but I think he's going to pace himself a little bit better. And then I think Jared Verse is going to be huge. So really, this defense is kind of pure chaos, and there's a lot of youth and there's a lot of exuberance. So I think, it's exciting because we have really no idea what it's going to end up being. But I think ultimately at the end of the season, when it's all said and done, this could end up being a top 10 defense. I would not be surprised if so.
And I was actually just about to ask you that. So there you go, answering my question. Because last year they kind of, I don't want to say they went for a similar approach, but they kind of did, right? Like a lot of patchwork with young players and kind of signed some 1-year deals just to kind of fill in these roles and roll the dice and say, hey, our system, we know we can call a good defense. We just got to get guys who can play that defense. They don't necessarily have to be good players or elite talent, but just able to play our system here. And just looking at the stats from last year, they were still average to slightly below average team, around like 17th in EPA per play, around 20th in DVOA. But again, if that's their floor and this team is able to improve and the young talent is able to get 1 year better, then I don't know. I can see how you can be high on this defense in 2023. Let's look at the offense here. And I want to specifically talk about the wide receivers. You mentioned, obviously, the emergence of Puka Nacua was a complete revelation for this offense. Steal of the 2023 draft, maybe one of the best steals in recent memories. And obviously, Cooper Kupp is now 31 years old, tons of injury history. So I'm just wondering how you see the target splits work for these wide receivers between Kupp and Nacua, and then also who you see as the third guy in this offense as that Z receiver. Is it Demarcus Robinson? Is it Tutu Atwell? How do you see the targets kind of playing out for our fantasy heads out there?
So it's really interesting because like we talked about the defense, and by the way, I did forget to mention, of course, the two corners they signed, Darius Williams and of course
Yes.
Trey White. But when you talk about the defense and kind of the unknown and the excitement and all that, you also have that with the offense. So the offense, they go out and they get Jonah Jackson in free agency. A lot of people don't realize this. Jonah Jackson was the backup plan for Kevin Dotson. They wanted to make sure all their bases were covered. If Dotson walked, he was going to be the guy they went after. Well, they watched so much film on Jonah Jackson. They fell in love with him. They said, screw it, let's go get them both. And I love that mentality because, first off, the winning teams, the teams that create dynasties, the teams that last are the teams that build from within. Okay, you build from the inside out. And I understand saying that when the Rams pay $30 million to a receiver, okay, fair. But at the same time, you're definitely seeing that on full display. They brought back Alec Jackson, left tackle. They moved Steve Avila to center, who is a natural center. So I love that move. They brought in Jonah Jackson. They brought back Kevin Dotson, who was one of the best guards, if not the best guard in football last year. And then you have Rob Havenstein, who's Mr. Reliable. The reason I bring up the offensive line is because the offensive line is everything. I just said not long ago in this show that when in 2022, they weren't a bad football team. They just had injuries. And when you have 16 different offensive line combinations started, you're not winning more than 6 games in a season. It's just not happening. So when you look at this offensive line, they're built to not only run the ball, but also protect Matthew Stafford. And the good thing is they also added Blake Corum to a running back room that has Kamren Williams, who I think is the second best running back in football right now, only behind Christian McCaffrey. And he proved that. If you want to go back and look the 4 games that he didn't play with the Rams, they went 1-3. The offense was not reliable at all. No idea what happened in the offense, but there was no imaginative ability whatsoever. And that's weird because it's Sean McVay. And what's even weirder is what Kamren Williams is able to do with just his legs when he's not a huge threat as a pass catcher at this point in his career. Maybe he could be, but he hasn't been great in the receiving game. So just imagine if he gets going or hell, Blake Corum gets going there. Now you have another dynamic. And that's not to mention the receivers that you're talking about. Now, Cooper Kupp goes down with an injury in August, comes back, week 5, had back-to-back 100-yard games. He had 400-yard games last year. A lot of people don't realize that. Almost had 800 yards despite missing those games. I will also say this. Cooper Kupp was not healthy the whole season. Okay. He played injured. It was very obvious. And a big reason I say this is because a lot of people are already out on him, fantasy heads alike. They would say, I saw him against Detroit. That was a shell of himself. He has fallen off. That is who he is. He is not. And I would just push back like wholeheartedly. And I would say he has not fallen off. Because when I say fallen off, when I hear that term, I'm thinking of like Randy Johnson on the Yankees in his 40s. Okay. Over the hill, it's over, right? That's the end of his career. He's falling off. He's not the same Randy Johnson that could pitch, 3 games in 5 days, which is insane. Okay. He's not that guy. And I say that because Cooper Kupp, when healthy, showed you he's still a 100-yard receiver in a game. He's still a guy that gets open. He's still a guy that can accelerate after the catch. He's still a guy that's a running back when he has the ball in his hands. He can break tackles. He fights for extra yards. So I'm excited about Cooper Kupp this year because I think Cooper Kupp really never got a chance to play at full strength alongside Puka Nacua the way he is. And keep in mind, the way Puka Nacua finished the season in that playoff game, having 180 something yards, he could have had 200 easily. And it shows you the growth. It shows you that, look, this offense isn't easy to pick up. It's not. But if you're able to do it, you're going to succeed at another level. And the fact that he was working out with Cooper Kupp all off season, these guys have a rapport, and Matthew Stafford has a rapport with both of them. I'm really excited for both of them. I think I've said this is a bold prediction. I don't care. I think both guys are capable of combining for 3,000 yards this year. I really believe that because I think this is a team that will be able to do whatever they want. I hear it all the time. Well, Jake, if you think that Kyron's going to go over 1,000 yards rushing and you think they're going to be able to be a dominant run team, how are they going to throw as much? Well, I'll be honest with you. There's no cap. At the end of the day, there's no cap on how much you can throw or run. Mm-hmm. If your offense just continues to move the ball, if you generate turnovers on the defensive side of the ball, then I hate to break it to you, but there's no limit, right? You can just continue to throw the ball, run the ball, score points. We've seen it before, teams putting up record-setting points. I think this team is capable of that. Now, I will say this. You mentioned the third receiver. The funny thing is, this is probably the weakest third receiver in Sean McVay's history. And at the same time, he's still really good. And I'm talking about Demarcus Robinson, okay? Robinson last year came on really strong. I've heard, and, Jordan Rodriguez, the Athletic, who covers the Rams very well, she has said the words aging in reverse to describe Demarcus Robinson. This is somebody that's never had 500 yards in a season. I think he's definitely getting that this season. The thing about Demarcus Robinson is that he's a top 10 blocking wide receiver. And if you want to play wide receiver for Sean McVay's offense, you have to be able to block. He can do that. And it really allows them kind of the versatility to play 11 or 12 personnel if they so choose. They can keep him out there. They can give Cooper Kupp a break. He can stretch the field. He's got jump ball skills. This is somebody that has really strong hands. We saw glimpses of this. They saw glimpses of this in camp. Like, all I kept hearing is he's having probably the best camp of any receiver aside from Puka Nacua, and they just can't find a way to get him on the field. Well, towards the end of the season, around week 13, he started to get more opportunities. And when he got more opportunities, he really made the most of it and ran with it. You saw the Giants game. Despite the 2 fumbles in that game, one of them was lost, he still looked really good. The Saints game was his coming out party. That was when everyone started to realize, okay, this guy's a part of this offense. And then you look at the Lions game, and he didn't really get an opportunity because they kind of force-fed Puka Nacua because the Lions secondary had no answer for him. But this is somebody that keeps opportunities open, can win inside, can win outside, can win underneath, can win over the top. Just a lot of versatility there. Great athlete. He's kept himself in great shape. He's well-liked by the organization. So he's the third guy, and I think the main point of this is he's the third guy. They signed him to a 1-year deal. And I think a lot of people thought this was going to be the end of Tutu Atwell, including myself to a degree. When they signed him and they were interested in Mike Evans and they showed interest in trading for Cortland Sutton and, they were meeting with Romo Dunze at the combine, I started to think, okay, I love Tutu Atwell. I think this guy is capable of being a poor man's Tyreek Hill and at the very least being Marquise Brown 2.0. But the reality is that I'm just seeing the Rams are showing interest in these big bodied receivers. You're not showing interest in Cortland Sutton, Mike Evans, and Romo Dunze if you're not interested in a jump ball, a guy that could box out defenders like a power forward in the NBA. And that was scary to me as a Tutu Atwell fan. Now I'll say this. They moved on from Ben Skoranek, and they didn't draft a receiver until round 6 with Jordan Whittington, who I'm stoked about. I think he is going to be really good. And if you're looking for anybody, obviously the stars would have to align, and probably hope they don't align because that would mean something bad happened to Kupp or Puka. But if you're looking for the closest thing to the next Puka Nacua, it's on the Rams, and it's Jordan Whittington. So I think he could absolutely emerge if given that opportunity. But going back to Tutu Atwell here, Atwell still has a place on this team. We saw last year Van Jefferson had a place on this team and was traded, early on in the season to make room when Cooper Kupp came back and give him an opportunity in a contract year. So there is a chance that Tutu Atwell has the same, thing. But when they traded away Ben Skoranek, that kind of told me they like Tutu Atwell more than people realize. And they also didn't draft anybody until the 6th round. So you look at, Demarcus Robinson being the 6'1", 200-pound prototypical wide receiver, and he's got really good, frame. The margin for error isn't as slim for Stafford. If he's throwing over the middle, he's a big target. He can hang on to the ball and all that. Tutu Atwell does not get enough credit for being 165 pounds soaking wet, 5'9", and going up and mossing the crap out of the ball. He's not afraid to go vertical. He's not afraid to, come down with it, through contact. So I think that's something that he doesn't get enough credit for. But at the same time, his speed is still a threat. And let's not forget, there was a time in that playoff game where it was him flipping into the end zone. He had one target all game, and it was a touchdown. Okay, and you saw the speed, the explosion. They call him Turbo. There's a reason for that. So I think all 4 of those receivers can coexist. I think Tutu Atwell has a place on this roster. Does it mean that he is the go-to number 3? No, I think it's Demarcus Robinson because of just, like I said, the margin for error is a lot slimmer with Atwell because of the size. I'm 5'8", so I know, being short, I mean, you have your advantages and you have your disadvantages. And unfortunately for Atwell, as great as his vertical is, if Stafford overthrows you, that could be a pick. Whereas if he's overthrowing Demarcus Robinson, it's probably going to be a catch. A little, if it's a little bit over his head, he can probably still come down with it. So that's something to keep in mind. You have Jordan Whittington as well. You have Tyler Johnson, who has experience playing in the postseason with Tom Brady. They have a really good receiver room. They have a tight end room. Tyler Higbee will be back at some point. But they added Colby Parkinson, who they're really excited about. Not only can this guy, catch, because we saw him at Stanford, 6'7", 247 pounds. And this is somebody that is very athletic, can make plays, can be a problem, as a seam buster. But at the same time, he's a great blocker. And that was something that Sean McVay noticed early on. I think he's really going to help the run game. I'm excited about him. And I'm really excited about the maturation of Davis Allen, who was one of my favorite tight ends in the draft last year. They got him in the 5th round out of Clemson. This is somebody that has really good jump ball ability. Those 50-50 balls, he turns them into 80-20. He can make plays after the catch. They used him a lot down the stretch last year. So I'm really curious to see where he is this year. But I think all in all, I'll be honest with you, this Rams offense, there's no reason why it can't be top 3 in the league.
Yeah, absolutely. All this, I mean, they've invested, like you mentioned, pieces into it, right? Drafting a bunch of pieces, bringing in Colby Parkinson, who can help block. And then obviously, like you mentioned before, that offensive line where you extend Kevin Dotson, you sign Jonah Jackson, invest in your guards, and you have two of the eight highest paying guards in the NFL. A lot could go right for this team. And obviously, again, you have the talent at quarterback, you have the talent at wide receiver, you have Kyren Williams, you bring in Blake Corum. There's a lot that can go right. for this team. Let's flip over. I want to talk about some expectations for the Rams in 2024. Right now, their win total is set at 8.5, just towards the over for them to win the NFC West, plus 384 for them to win the conference, 16-1, and Super Bowl 32-1. Like we talked about off the top of the show, in terms of win total expectations in 2023, the Rams were the biggest overachievers compared to the market. Preseason market, Market was completely wrong about them. They disrespected Sean McVay. Coming into 2024, I feel like with an 8.5 win total, they're still kind of getting a little bit disrespected here. So, Jake, tell me what your expectations are for the Rams in 2024.
Yeah, I think really if Aaron Donald didn't retire, I think a lot of the mainstream would be in on them. I think it's really it scares them a little bit. But for people that really follow this team, that have watched this team, I watched all the games 4 times over. So I watched a lot of tape on these guys during the offseason. And I just came away really impressed with certain guys that stood out that maybe I didn't give enough credit initially. So I'll say this. I think this team, the expectation is that they're going to 100% be back in the playoffs. No doubt about it. But I think this needs to be upped, okay? I think when you look at this team, this is one of the best teams in football, okay? They have one of the best coaching staffs. They have Matthew Stafford, who's one of the best quarterbacks in football. They have superstars all across the board. Whether you realize it or not, Ernest Jones is becoming one, Then you have guys like Kamren Curl, but, Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, Kyron Williams. I mean, this is what makes this team work. So I think there is going to be a serious change with the Rams' approach. They didn't have as many turnovers last year. That was a big, knock on them. I think they changed that. They went out and they got Kamren Curl. They went out and got Darius Williams. They brought him back. Trey White, when healthy, could be a problem there. And then, Kobe Durant, I'm not out on either. 4th rounder from a few years ago. So I look at this team and I have them winning 13 games. I have them getting, for the first time in Sean McVay's career, I have them taking over the number 1 seed, winning the NFC West, and I have them playing in the Super Bowl against the Kansas City Chiefs. The reality is, I had them going 10-7 last year. So another one where I was dead on with the win total. So I haven't been right all the time, obviously. But I feel like this is the start of a run. I feel like, they might not have Stafford for more than 3 years, and that's fine. I think they could realistically win the Super Bowl 2 of the next 3 years because they hit on draft picks at the bottom of the draft like nobody. It's why that they're still around, despite not having a first-round pick and making the first round pick selection since Jared Goff. This is why that they have stuck around. And again, going back to the whole point, I think the mainstream just sees Aaron Donald retired and they think, well, Aaron Donald wouldn't have retired if this team is about to win a Super Bowl, right? And so I think a lot of it goes into that. But when you really think about it, this team is one of the best in football and the NFC is not that great. And as good as the 49ers are, another thing, the Rams really closed the gap last year. Yes, they beat them with, only a half of their starters playing or whatever. But even that early game, early in the season, week 2, the home opener, they were in that game, late in that game. And that was without Kevin Dotson. That was without Cooper Kupp. Puka Nacua was in his 2nd ever game. Kyron Williams had not even become what he ended up being. So I'm really excited to see those two duke it out because I would not be surprised if the 49ers won the NFC West again. But I really think that the Rams have closed the gap considerably, and I think they have gotten that monkey off their back.
Yeah, and we've seen it before where 2 teams from one division can definitely get a ton of wins with the Dallas Cowboys and the Philadelphia Eagles. But I think the key here is if they can steal some games from the Niners or steal, 1 or probably 2 games from the Niners within their division, they will lock up the division. Most likely. But anyways, that does it for us here today. Let us know your thoughts on the 2024 Rams in the comment section down below. And make sure you check out Jake on X, on Instagram, on TikTok at JK Bogan. And then also find him on YouTube here at Jake Ellenbogen. Just search that in the search bar and you will find him here on YouTube. And if you made it this far, guess what? That means you like our content. So please press that like button. It goes a long way for us here. And if you enjoy this content and you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. We'll be doing all 32 NFL teams here on Forward Progress as we make our way towards training camp. So make sure you turn on notifications when you subscribe so you never miss out. And if you don't like notifications, there's a playlist somewhere on the screen right now. Click on that playlist. You can find all of our NFL team previews. So thank you so much for tuning in, guys, and we'll see you in the next one.